more of our time, but I'm not holding my breath. Today, we're going to have, first and foremost, I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes from both February 6th and February 8th. Representative Neighbor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that we approve the minutes of February 6th and February 8th as written.
Seconded by Representative Dodson. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Very good. The minutes are approved. First time I've gotten that in the right order, so that's a pretty good thing right there. All right. Today we're going to be having a hearing on HB 2325, adding maternity center to the definition of healthcare provider for purposes of Healthcare Provider Insurance Availability Act. To get us up to speed, you are not Eileen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No, I am not Eileen. She is keeping track of those senators over there trying to do work today. So you get in the B team. I am David Weiss with the Reviser Statutes Office. And House Bill 2325 would codify a budget proviso from the 2022 omnibus budget bill that added maternity center to the definition of healthcare provider for purposes of the Healthcare Insurance Provider Availability Act. The budget proviso, under the budget proviso, a maternity center was deemed to be a healthcare provider if, one, the maternity center was granted accreditation by a national organization recognized by the Board of Governors of the Healthcare Stabilization Fund, and whose accreditation standards are approved by the board, or two, if the maternity center is defined as a maternity center in KSA 65503. This bill would permanently codify the addition of maternity center to the definition of healthcare provider, but slightly amends the language stating that if such maternity center has been granted accreditation by the Commission for Accreditation of Birth Centers, or if such maternity center is a maternity center as defined in KSA 65503 and amendments thereto. And you can see the actual definition, the new language on page 2, lines 28 through 31. It'd be a new paragraph T, cap T on there. That is the definition that would be included in the Healthcare Insurance Provider Availability Act. The bill also then makes some much needed edits to the definition for clarification and readability, and then there's also just some cleanup language within the bill that we're striking some things just to help make the statute a little more readable. And I can stand for any questions, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you, David. Any questions for the reviser? And I'm not convinced that your B team, I think that maybe Eileen drew the short straw and she had to go over to the east side.
It's definitely more fun on this side.
All right, committee, questions for David, for the reviser? Seeing none. I think you've done a bang-up job. All right, we'll now open proponent testimony. First up, actually, all of our proponents are via WebEx, apparently. So, Tech Guru, are we up and running, and can we get Kendra Wyatt dialed in from the secret squares? That was a TV show a long time ago.
This is Kendra. Can you hear me?
I can.
Hi, I'm happy to get going if you're ready for my testimony. I'll jump in.
I am indeed. Welcome to committee.
Thank you. Dear Chairman and members of the Insurance and Pensions Committee, my name is Kendra Wyatt, and I'm the Chief Executive Officer of New Birth Company, which is a KDHE licensed, state licensed birth center facility located in Overland Park. House Bill 2325 is the result of 2 years now of ongoing diligent work in order to fix a gap in facility malpractice coverage for state licensed birth centers. This started back in 2021 when we were forced to close a much needed birth center located in Kansas City, Kansas, as a result of not having access to the availability plan and the Healthcare Stabilization Fund. We did cartwheels and loops and all kinds of things you don't want to have to do in order to keep our facility open in Overland Park. And as the revisor referenced, we're able to scoot by in the last year with a proviso, but obviously that is not a normal way of doing business. I think it's good for everyone to know that the Senate companion bill that did go through last year passed the Senate 40-0. So this is a good, solid, conservative piece of legislation. I will tell you that without this legislation, that we will not be able to meet the mandated facility coverage requirements that are mandated by the CanCare managed care companies. And as a result, we would not be able to continue serving CanCare mothers and families past July 1. I'd also like to, again, thank Clark Schultz and the Healthcare Stabilization Fund. This has been, again, 2 years of diligent work regarding this bill. And lastly, I want to give you all some kudos and some good news that Kansas, the state of Kansas, and our regulatory environment for birth centers is being lauded by other states, and Iowa, Nebraska, Missouri, where they do not have any operating licensed birth centers right now, are looking to Kansas as an exemplar where we do have 5 state licensed birth centers. This bill will not change anything that the other birth centers are doing. It is not a mandate, and it will enable credentialed, again, licensed and nationally accredited birth centers to obtain this required malpractice. And I will stand for any questions. Thank you.
All right, it seems like you have generated a couple of questions. You didn't get off as easy as the revisor, but I don't think it'll be terrible. Representative Proctor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Kendra, for the testimony. So when we were working on this last year, one of the things that I always had to fight through is the confusion between you and a pregnancy crisis center. Could you please explain what it is, the service that you provide, and how it's different from in a hospital environment or these pregnancy crisis centers? Thank you.
That is a great question, and I think it's important, and we need members of this committee to help educate the other members of the legislature regarding the 3 terms: birth center, maternity center, and pregnancy center. So I will walk through them very quickly. If you can reference my written testimony, I added the definitions of American levels of maternity care. And that is a really good way to understand that the birth center, which is what we are, and in Kansas statute, we're referred to as maternity centers, that we are a facility. We are an outpatient facility version of a hospital. We provide labor and delivery services, facility services, to support the normal labor, birth, and recovery and normal newborn care. We are, again, an outpatient facility, so moms who are at our facility, they are admitted and they are discharged, and we use, in the state of Kansas, we use what's referred to as UB04 billing, which in the revenue cycle world for healthcare in America is an indicator that you are a facility, and specifically actually an inpatient facility. And they did that on purpose to make it very clear that we are a facility, not a clinic. So again, a pregnancy center is a term that is used by it's a clinic setting. We're very familiar with pregnancy centers. We work with them and accept their referrals all the time, but those are outpatient, non-licensed, and certainly not a facility. That is a place where a woman can receive counseling for pregnancy services, but that is not the context of the bill.
Certainly, go ahead.
Could you, I've been to your facility, it's pretty awesome, but could you just describe why would a woman go to a maternity center rather than delivering their baby in a hospital in terms of outcomes and in terms of the kind of deliveries you can do?
Yeah, this certainly became very apparent during COVID. Again, Kansas has very good regulatory environments for birth centers. They are for low-risk women, so moms are risk adjusted from the very beginning of their pregnancies. In fact, we see many more women who do not meet our risk criteria for reasons of high blood pressure or a breech baby, for example. We don't do any of that. We do low-risk, normal vaginal deliveries. This is natural childbirth. In a safe space that has the emergency supplies and knowledge to be able to transfer a mom quickly if possible. But I will tell you that the vast majority of mothers are referred and transferred well before they go into active labor. Why do women want to choose this option? Well, I have to remind everybody, if our grandmothers and great grandmothers hadn't chosen this option, we wouldn't all be here. And for many mothers, just like the world champion chiefs, they're world champion birthers. They're fabulous birthers. This is the epitome of families coming together. There are triumphant moments. These women are athletes. They're mindset warriors. And they absolutely believe, many of them are inspired by faith traditions, and that's all religion and faith customs that they're meant by their creator to be able to give birth naturally. So this is something that's been going on for a very long time. And now in the birth center setting, we can enable that to happen very safely and know that we're within an organized system of care if we do need to take moms into the hospital setting. Our outcomes are exemplary, and that is why quality collaboratives across the nation. I have to remind everybody, the U.S. does not have the best birth outcomes in the world. We actually rank very low amongst industrialized countries, and birth centers do an exemplary job of enabling, again, low-risk mothers to have great birth outcomes for themselves and their newborns.
All right, Representative Neighbor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for presenting today. I remember your testimony last year, and a couple of clarification questions. You all are mostly midwives?
We
Is
are
that correct?
APRN nurse midwives at
APRNs.
New Birth Company. We happen to be full practice APRNs. Our nurse midwives are actually also CNMIs with the Board of Healing Arts. So we've got the highest level of credentials and licensure certifications possible.
Do you have any physicians on your property?
There are no physicians required nor needed in a normal vaginal childbirth situation. In fact, the whole point is to go to physicians in the hospital setting versus have a physician do the same exact catching a baby. This is normal, natural childbirth. Epidurals, use of medications, extended monitoring is outside the scope of the birth center. We're talking about natural childbirth. So physicians are absolutely invited. And in fact, we encourage physicians to come and catch babies in the birth center. Most of them don't care to do that. So they are considered an appropriate birth attendant, and they are welcome to be in the birth center.
Also, I've had patients before that they're on their 10th delivery, and they did it through midwives, which was great, but on the 10th one, being in perfect health, had a heart attack immediately after delivering in a birthing center. And how would you handle that?
So I have to ask, just as a point of order, what context that question has for the bill in terms of malpractice. Our regulations with the state of Kansas regulates our emergency procedures in terms of being able to provide CPR. Every single one of our staff members has to practice extended BLS in order to react to that. And someone of that extreme gravida is what we refer to that mom, may or may not even be a good candidate to be in the birth center.
Okay, she did go through a birth center, and I asked that question because there has to be a protocol backup in case something does go wrong. Even if they're low risk, emergencies can happen. How do I know that? My daughter's an OBGYN. So
Representative
emergencies
Neighbor,
can
I'm
happen.
happy I'm happy to follow up with you and the Secretary of Health regarding the existing regulations on birth centers. And in our case, being a nationally accredited birth center, that level of quality requirement is actually higher.
And my last question is, last year, the reason it didn't go through our committee was there some funding issues. You were attached to a company in Wichita, is that correct? Or another birthing center in Kansas?
I have
That
nothing
was,
to,
and that was
I-
stopping what was happening with this particular passage.
I would ask, is Clark Schultz in the
Yes,
room?
he is. He is.
I think Clark would do a great job in clarifying the questions regarding the different types of birth centers. We are very confident that this bill does not impede or require anything of any of the existing licensed birth centers.
All right, so you're separate from Wichita now.
We have nothing to do with Wichita.
Thank you.
All right, and I think okay, never mind. Representative Bergquist.
Yes, thank you, ma'am, for your testimony. Thank you, Mr. Chair. With the normal birthing process, do you anticipate a day in and day out within 24 hours? Is that normal, or?
That actually is defined by the state regulations, that a mom does not stay at the birth center more than 24 hours after delivery. And there are also normal regulatory recommendations and standards of care regarding a mom wouldn't be admitted before she's active labor. It's very similar to a level 1 maternity hospital. Very, very well regulated and very normal.
Thank you, ma'am, and thank you, Mr. Chair.
Right, further questions? Yes, Representative Meyer.
Not a question. Thank you so much for being here. Kendra's, her facility is located within my district, so I just wanted to acknowledge that for Representative Neighbors so that she understood that she is an Overland Park based. Okay, just want to make sure.
All right. Yes, Representative Howerton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So being new to the committee, I'm just trying to grasp this bill. So right now you are not covered by insurance. So we're trying to allow your centers to be covered by insurance. Is that, sorry, help me out if you would, please.
I'll comment, and I think I'm going to forward my time to Clark because on behalf of the stabilization fund, I think he can speak more broadly to everything. There's a gap, and we didn't run into the gap until the other malpractice companies left the market, and when there is no one else serving the market in Kansas, then we all rely on the Healthcare Stabilization Fund and the availability plan. And Rebecca Williams is also going to give proponent testimony and I think can help clarify that. So I think it is important to note birth centers are a CMS mandated service. They're recommended for low risk women. They should be propagated and supported. And so in order to be able to do business with CanCare and manage Medicaid, we have to have this liability coverage. And I do want to point out, this is not separate from the malpractice that covers the midwife. If we're talking about something happening, the majority of the emphasis is going to go on the provider, just like it would in the situation of being in the hospital setting.
All right, further questions, committee? Seeing none, I think you've done it. Thank you very much for being here. Next up for proponent testimony, and committee, we will have Clerk Schultz testifying. He was referenced several times. He'll be in a few minutes. He's down on the neutral category, so just hang on tight to those questions. But first, we're going to continue with our proponent testimony. And IT Guru, if you could summon Rebecca Williams to the stage. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Rebecca Williams, are you there? Fall off somewhere. We can't hear you, Rebecca, so if our responses seem strange, that's why.
Okay, I finally figured out how to get the audio to work on my end. Can you hear me now?
I can, yes, we can hear you now. Welcome to
Okay,
committee.
great. Thank you. I just wanted, as the insurance agent that has worked with this birthing center for a number of years, wanted to state emphatically that I support the bill to include birthing centers within the Healthcare Stabilization Fund. I think that will make it much easier and more cost effective for us to obtain professional liability insurance for them. I don't know why they were not included from the beginning, but I would wholeheartedly support passing this bill in order to help them obtain reasonable and good insurance coverage.
Okay. Committee, any questions for Rebecca Williams? Yes, Representative Proctor.
So the question came up a little while ago about why, why this birthing center was dropped from insurance, and they had to go through some interesting dynamics to get coverage until this proviso was passed. Could you go through that really quickly, kind of the blow by blow on that?
I can. They were insured with MMIC. MMIC said that they had bad experience with birthing centers in other states and decided no longer to insure independent birthing centers under their program. It was a very reasonably priced program. And they were giving them $1.3 million limit. Now, this group has never had a claim. But we have to insure them at this point for $1.3 million because they don't have access to coverage through the Healthcare Stabilization Fund. I went to Medical Protective, Pro Assurance. I can give you a list of at least 16 insurance companies that typically write medical professionals in Kansas, and all of them declined because they said in other states they were having large claims paid out to because of birthing centers, independent birthing centers. Now they'll write nurse midwives if they're part of an OBGYN group of physicians or if they are part of a hospital, but they won't write independent ones. So we had to go to the Kansas Availability Plan, which is the insurance coverage for professional liability of last resort in Kansas, and ask them to provide the coverage for new birth. New birth then was allowed coverage, and they do pay into the Healthcare Stabilization Fund now with limits of 500,000, 1.5 million primary, but they're paying like 3 or 4 times what they used to pay for it. So it's really put a damper on their budget. They ended up closing their KCK office, which I know was a very important part for women in Kansas City, Kansas that couldn't afford to go to a hospital to have their babies. And I think this, putting this birthing center as part of the normal coverage will allow more insurance companies hopefully to come in and provide insurance at a much more reasonable rate. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
All right, committee, any further questions? Yes, Representative Neighbor.
Does the bill that's before us today correct what the concern was last year? that the birthing centers themselves do not qualify as a defined healthcare provider. Has that been corrected in this bill, or are they still under that premise?
They added it in on T.
I just found the answer. Thank you.
Okay.
I'm not a lawyer, but I play one on TV. David's like, yeah, you're right. You're not a lawyer. Committee, any further questions? Seeing none. All right. Thank you for being here. Sort of here.
Thank you.
All right. I have no one else listed as a proponent for 2325. Would anyone care to speak as a proponent? All right. I'll close proponent testimony. Knowing that we have neutral, I'm going to go ahead and ask for opponents first. I have no one listed as an opponent. Would anyone like to speak as an opponent? All right, seeing none, I'll close opponent testimony, and we'll go on with neutral. And with neutral, I have the often mentioned Clark Schultz. Clark, welcome to committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, and I think that's probably a bad thing to be often mentioned, but in any case, thank you for the opportunity to be here today to provide neutral testimony and to answer any of the questions that you might have. My name is Clark Schultz, and I'm the Executive Director of the Healthcare Stabilization Fund, which was put into place by statute in 1976 when we were in a hard market condition and healthcare providers were having difficulty finding affordable insurance, medical malpractice insurance, if they could find it at all. So the legislature wisely created this new body of law that also created the Availability Fund, which means that if you are a defined healthcare provider and you can't find insurance out on the open market, it will be available for you in the availability plan, for sure. And then in addition to that, the Stabilization Fund provides a second layer of coverage. Currently, as of 2 years ago, the legislature changed the law on this, but currently a healthcare provider would buy $500,000 of insurance from a company, and if they're not able to find that $500,000, they can buy from the availability plan, and then they are also required to pay a surcharge and get an additional $500,000 from the stabilization fund. So think of us, the Stabilization Fund, as an insurance company, but we are not. We are a state agency, but surcharge rather than premium comes in to the fund, and then we provide $500,000 in secondary coverage for healthcare providers. We currently provide coverage for over 17,000 healthcare providers in the state, and last year, we closed 542 claim files. So these would be Kansans who had had some undesirable issue with the health care that they received. And we paid out over $29 million in compensation to those people. So we have 3 attorneys on staff. We manage a lot of files, obviously. We've closed 542. Some of them end up going to court. Some of them are settled. Some of them are dismissed. So we are there to serve our healthcare provider community, and also we are there to provide services for the typical Kansan that's receiving healthcare. So medical care. So we've been around for 47 years. And we are guided by a board of governors of 11 members. Those come from the provider community, the healthcare provider community. And we are required by law to achieve actuarial integrity of the fund and to pay out when necessary to our board of governors meets regularly, and once a year they set the surcharges for the 17,000 plus healthcare providers who pay in. Again, rather than premium, they're paying a surcharge. This all has worked very well, I believe, and it has resulted in Kansas being the number 4 of the states with the least expensive annual medical malpractice liability insurance. And I'm very pleased with that number. Last year, if I had appeared before you, we were number 5. So we've actually moved in the right direction. Regarding House Bill 2325, current statute allows maternity centers who are organized as professional corporations to be included in the definition of healthcare provider. House Bill 2325 provides an additional avenue for a maternity center that is not organized as a professional corporation. The intent of the bill is to allow the maternity center that is not a professionally organized corporation to have access to the availability plan and the stabilization fund by doing 2 things. One, being a licensed maternity center, and secondly, having accreditation. Now, I will point out here, and I'm not here to, we do not take a position on the bill because we're state agency. And we believe, of course, that it's up to the legislature to decide who's going to be a defined healthcare provider and who's not. I do want to comment, though, that I think that the intent of the bill it needs at least one word changed. On page 2 of the bill, on line 29, there is the next to the last word is or, and I think that needs to be changed to and. Because I think, and I have researched this, I saw the original language that was proposed, and it did have the word and I think through a miscommunication that has changed to or. But I've had our attorneys review it as well to make sure I'm not totally off base there. But I think, and obviously the proponents would want to weigh in on this, but that's one thing that you'll want to at least clarify before, if and when you work the bill. Other than that, the section K and L on page 1 and 2 refer to a professional corporation, and that would include a maternity center. So I want you to understand, this adds a new avenue for a maternity center. This bill does. There already is an avenue, but it is regarding professional organized corporations. Now, Representative Neighbor asked some questions regarding associations with Wichita and so forth, and she has a good memory. And there was a lot of things swirling around last year. Can I stop here, Mr. Chairman, and say that Representative Neighbor was my ranking member on this committee a couple years ago.
So she trained you too?
Yes, she did. Yes, she did. So I'm delighted that she is still here. But there's a wide assortment of maternity centers in the state, and some of them are set up differently than others. What I think the intent of this bill is to make sure that maternity centers that are not that are not organized as professional corporations, but that have all the staff, the accreditation and so forth, they want to have access. And that's reasonable. Currently they do, by the way, which I think you've all understand that now because of a proviso in a budget bill last year. New birth does have access. This puts it into a more permanent state, is what this does. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I would stop and take any questions if that's your desire.
Absolutely. And it sounds like we have one already. Representative Proctor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I got a couple questions, if that's all right. Okay. We got a lot of new people on the committee here, and I wondered if you would just take a minute to kind of explain the Healthcare Stabilization Fund. Where's the money come from that's in the fund if you have to pay out on a claim?
Okay, sure, absolutely. When it was created in 1976, a surcharge was placed on every healthcare provider. There are 22 categories. For example, if you are a brain surgeon, you're going to pay more of a surcharge than if you are a family physician or a chiropractor. And so there are classifications. So when a healthcare provider purchases insurance on the open market, they pay that premium, but most of the companies that sell insurance in Kansas will also figure up what the surcharge will be, and it's based on one of those 22 or 24 categories, and they collect that as well. Then they send that into the stabilization fund, and that money, similarly to an insurance company, is largely invested. And with those returns, it adds to the fund. And each year, the Board of Governors reviews that. We have an actuary that does an actuary study every year and reports to the board. Do surcharges need to be increased? Do they need to be decreased? And they review the investments and the pooled money investment board by state law. And they keep an eye on all the financials in that way. In addition to that, we have a legislative oversight committee that meets every October that includes some of the members of our Board of Governors, but also includes legislators. I believe 4 legislators, 2 senators, and 2 representatives. And they also look at the financials, and they are, if need be, are able to have a second actuarial study done. And in my tenure, they have not done that, but that's always available to do if they believe that there is reason to do so. So anyway, all of the money comes in, it goes in, it's invested, and then our attorneys, we hire outside counsel. As I said, we have 3 attorneys, and if a case is filed, we then many times seek outside counsel, and we try to either reach a settlement or we go to court. And then when a settlement is signed off by a judge or it goes to court and judgment is made, we write checks. And so we're, I think that's probably exhausted.
It ends when the checks get written. That's the end of the story every time. Yes.
Did I do good enough on the first one?
You were okay on the first one. Let's give you another chance.
So I guess it's kind of a 2-part question, but it's about the risk that we're taking on by bringing birthing, maternity centers into the definition of healthcare and adding. First, does the Board of Governors, have they weighed in on this? Do they think it's an acceptable risk? And second, how many are we talking about? How many maternity centers in Kansas meet this definition right now?
Those are excellent questions. And first of all, to the board. The board has discussed this idea, but again, the board generally leaves that up to the legislature. you know, we are interested in the financial fiscal integrity of the fund, but, you know, also we are there to ensure as needed and as the legislature tells us to do. I will tell you that the new birth center in trying to be just excellent players in this have tried to come up with language that is, you know, life's a risk, but they've, you know, you have to be, in this case, if you change it to the or to and, you have to be a maternity center as defined in KSA 65-503, and they have to have been granted accreditation from the Commission on Accreditation of Birth Centers. So when you say that, that's some high standards, and I think that, you know, it's just like anything else. You never know who's going to sue for what, but you know, we're there to try to give low-cost coverage for our providers, and we want that. We want our providers to be able to be in business and to provide services for Kansans. And that's what this is about.
So how many do you think qualify?
There now, you know, and I should know this, Representative, and I'm sorry, there are, I believe, 97 certified licensed midwives in the state. And there are 6, 7, 8 birthing centers, and that may include counting one where they actually have two offices. So, and that changes, but that's not, that hasn't been on our list particularly because we, unless they're professionally organized, we're not insuring them.
You don't know how many of those are accredited, though?
What I know is that there are, if you're talking about accredited, okay. No, I do know that. There is one maternity center that is accredited, and that is, I do keep up on that and have that's very recent.
So if we do this, we're talking about one maternity center?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sorry. Thank you for indulging me.
Representative Charwater.
Thank you, and Clark, thanks for being here. I got a point of clarification. You said your secondary, the second $500,000, they have to purchase $500,000 somewhere else. What if they don't?
If they do not purchase the $500,000 base insurance, we'll call it, they are out of compliance, and when we become aware of it, we report to the licensing authority. We have no real authority ourselves, but we, if we were to find a physician that was not complying, we would notify the Board of Healing Arts, for example.
So is there still a $500,000 gap? It's like this birthing center evidently can't find insurance anywhere else, so they don't have the first $500,000, or do they?
No, they do. They do. They have either purchased, and I on this particular one, I believe that they have purchased from the availability plan, and Kendra would certainly be able to explain that. But no, we would not. They are in compliance with the proviso that was put into place in the budget bill last year.
All right, so, I mean, you know as well as everybody on this committee that insurance is a risk-reward type situation. These birthing centers, independent birthing centers not attached to OBGYNs, there's probably a reason that they got canceled by their current carrier, and they shopped it, was it 17 or 20 some companies also denied them. Those companies know something, and they're not willing to take the risk. Are you sure that we want to put Kansas dollars on the line for a terrible risk that all of the industry has recognized is an issue?
Yeah, very good question, and as you well said, it's everything is a risk. Currently, I'll start with this. If you are a licensed midwife now, you're already in as a defined provider. So, what we're really talking about is the organization where they're working. And granted, if somebody filed a lawsuit, they would file probably against the midwife and the organization. So that would likely be the case, not necessarily. So what do companies know? I mean, the market, the insurance market, medical malpractice market is tightening. And I think that's probably true of most of the categories that we deal with. Yeah, that's something that you want to consider clearly as risk.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, Representative Neighbor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and Clark, it is so nice to see you. You are definitely a mentor of mine. Learned a great deal. If my recollection is correct, they were also tied to a group, weren't they, in Wichita or somewhere else in Kansas that didn't meet the guidelines, and that was a stickler that the other group wouldn't buy in, or was that?
I think you might now be referring to, I think that New Birth had, or it may have been a different name, had one in Wyandotte, and Kendra would clearly be able to, and if I'm not saying that correctly right now, she's clearly telling somebody right now. But I think it might be like Wyandotte. There was another center, and I think that one closed its doors.
Okay. And I would say to Mr. Tarwater, if I could, you know, when you deliver a baby, and I know this from having two relatives in my family that have done that, is that if a baby is stillborn, you don't know that's going to happen. And that can bring a lawsuit because when they're born, it's just that way. Or they're born with something that didn't show up. Cystic fibrosis. I mean, there are a lot of things that can come up when the child is born. And parents always want somebody to blame, whether it's genetic or whether it's just a thing of God or whatever it is. And they will sue because that is something that was very valuable to them. And so $1 million is nothing in one of these lawsuits. And I say that knowing what has happened sometimes. So it is a risk, I think, when we look at it. But I don't know if that risk is such that we deny, but we're only doing this for one group. So I think that makes it a little tough in deciding whether that risk is worthwhile. And I just say that from experience because they pay out lots of money. OBGYNs pay a lot in malpractice.
All right, Representative Proctor, who's itching at the button over here.
So, so I carried this bill last year, and and you can correct me if I'm wrong, because the year feels like 10,000 up here, but the issue was that the definition wasn't tight enough, and this Wichita birth center that had some, this is where Wichita came in. There was a birth center in Wichita that would have been qualified under the previous language that we were not comfortable getting hitched to. There was never an issue with the one in Wyandotte or in Overland Park that she still has, but did she get dropped because of something that was going on, or did she get dropped because she couldn't get access to the Healthcare Stabilization Fund because of how she was organized, and so they decided to drop her?
Can I answer that question? It's Rebecca.
Oh, very good, Rebecca.
'Cause I-
Sure, chime in.
Okay, because I've insured her for years. Yeah, originally, so because New Birth was not owned by a defined healthcare provider, it was owned by Kendra and some other investors. They didn't qualify originally for coverage through the Healthcare Stabilization Fund. So MMIC was providing 1 million, 3 million for the corporation, and then all the nurse midwives had their coverage and coverage through the Healthcare Stabilization Fund. MMIC did not want to insure them anymore. And again, New Birth has never had a claim. It was because of the activity with other birthing centers that MMIC declined to cover them. So what Kendra ended up doing was signing an agreement with one of her nurse midwives to own the business so she could qualify for coverage through the Healthcare Stabilization Fund. That's how she got the coverage through the availability plan with the Healthcare Stabilization Fund as excess. So what this bill really was planned to do is make birthing centers, just like hospitals, not have to be owned by doctors. They can be owned by anyone in the corporate world. But New Birth is accredited. And regarding your comment about concern about claims being high, I know for a fact, because I've worked with them for years, I've been to the birthing center multiple times. If a woman does not qualify as a very low risk, they won't take her. They have agreements with OBGYNs that if someone shows any sign during the prenatal process of being at high or even medium risk, they send that woman to a full OBGYN and tell her that she does not qualify to have the baby at the birthing center. Now, if an emergency happens at the last minute, they also have a transfer agreement, and Overland Park Regional is right down the street. And so they send the woman to Overland Park Regional immediately. So they have very, very good risk management practices in place.
Mr. Chair, if I, just to wrap, I promise I'll shut up after this. So you anticipate that once they have permanent access in statute to the Healthcare Stabilization Fund, that's going to fix the insurance problem. That's the missing element of risk.
Correct.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. I will sit here and not say a word, I promise.
See about that. Representative Howerton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So you had suggested on page 2, line 29, changing the and to, or the or to and. If we don't change that, does it open it up to other birth centers to be covered?
Yes, and I think that I also kind of hear that same kind of question from Representative Proctor as far as, you know, the references to Wichita. Keep one thing in mind. When you are a defined healthcare provider, this is mandatory. It's not optional. It's not, oh, I can't, you know, I think I want to buy insurance this year and I don't this year. No, it's then you are required by state law to buy 500 base insurance, 500 coverage from the stabilization fund. I don't want to put words in other maternity centers' mouths, but there are, I believe, maternity centers that really don't want to do that. And currently, they don't have to. If you don't change the word or, you will require everybody to. That's the way I read this. So if you want to require every maternity center to not only have access to the fund, but be required to purchase, you could leave it the way it is. But there will be, I suspect, some maternity centers that will have, that won't want to do that.
Okay, and a follow-up is, thank you, Mr. Chair. Is this changing the law? That is the only option for this one business? That is their only option.
Depending on the requirements that Kendra spoke with, if she were, I believe if she were able to find insurance for the new birth center, she maybe wouldn't, that would suffice. She could have the insurance coverage she needed for the programs that she's in. But other than that, the other option, which you just heard Rebecca talk about, changing ownership, but that's not a viable thing, really. And so, end of the day, yeah, this is what, in order to provide guaranteed insurance issued to her and access to the stabilization fund, you need to change the law. And keep in mind, that's current law or similar to this. It's not the exact same language, but it's similar to this currently. But that will run out on June 30th because it was put in a proviso. So at the end of the budget year, it goes away. So you could,
So for clarification, we made a law that made her get insurance, and now you're proposing a bill that would provide for that insurance?
the proviso that was passed last year was a temporary solution so that she could have access to the availability plan if she needed, and she could purchase coverage, pay a surcharge to the stabilization fund. That would not have been Kendra's, the way she wanted to do it. That was sort of a last-minute thing so that she didn't go out of business or have to figure out what she was going to do with her ownership.
The only reason she needs the insurance is because we require her to have the insurance.
No, I think I see what you're saying. No, she has federal plans that she serves. Again, she serves low income patients. Yes, and so that's what really, in order for her to do that, she has to have insurance, and then she goes to buy insurance, she can't find it.
The proviso, if I could explain it a little bit, was this bill, but only temporary. If you put policy into a budget bill, you can do it as a proviso. It's a one-year law. When the budget bill ends, or when the budget year ends, so do whatever provisos you stacked into it. They also end. I'm sorry? Yes. Yeah, the or probably was just somewhere in translation, a mistake. Representative Tar, I preempted you. I'm sorry about that, man. All right. All right. And Representative Howell, did you have a question? I saw a look on your face.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Two things, if that's okay with the Chair. Number one, if the birthing center, since we appear to be only discussing one at this point, if this birthing center fails to meet the criteria, the accreditation standards, or have the approval of the Board of Governors, et cetera, if they somehow eventually start to fail in this standard that is set forth here, then wouldn't they just be disqualified? And so there would no longer be a liability to the state?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And then my other question is, and again, newbie here, not an insurance agent, why couldn't other birthing centers qualify under the same standards as this birthing center under this bill as it exists? Why are we talking about it as are we just saying this is the only birthing center that currently qualifies, or are we saying this is the only birthing center that could ever qualify and we're never allowing somebody else to qualify under this bill?
Good question. No, anybody that wanted to could then take the action, get the certification, or the, and accreditation, and do that. They also have the option that is already there, that where if it's a professionally organized corporation, so they will have two options to do that. So any other birthing centers out there that want to have access to this can take action in two ways. If you pass this, two ways. And if they do not, then they do not have to do that. And it is, again, without me trying to talk about it, they're all over the board, but I believe when we talk to them, there are some who would prefer not to. It's a little more simple birthing center, and that's how they do business. So this kind of gives more choices, I suppose.
All right, committee, Representative Dodson.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I'm just trying to think through the scenarios here. So someone has 500,000 base, and then you have this, let's just call it a backup fund, but you have, let's say, obligations of cash, and you don't have real insurance. So if someone sues, you cover whatever is above that 500,000 base?
Well, in order to have access to the stabilization fund, you have to have that base policy of $500,000. So you have an insurance company that's, actually, that's not entirely true if you're larger hospitals self-insure, but if you are a physician, you have to buy the $500,000 from an insurance company, and then the additional $500,000 coverage from the stabilization fund. So if a lawsuit comes, the insurance company takes the first $500,000. It's only if it reaches above that that the stabilization fund kicks in.
Well, I remember doing this either last year or last session, year one or year two, just for that purpose. I think we raised it to 1.5 or something. So does this work exactly the same way?
Yes, it does. And when you recall correctly, prior to taking action 2 years ago, a physician or a medical care provider had to buy a $200,000 policy and then excess coverage from us. And they had three options. They could buy just $100,000. It was standardized 2 years ago, so now it's everybody's $500,000, and then the stabilization fund is $500,000. Our Board of Governors, by the way, has the authority to offer an additional amount, and sometime in the future they may, but because of a lack of the data at this point, they chose to just offer the one amount.
All right, committee, have we beat this horse into submission yet? I believe so. Thank you, Clark, for being here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, committee.
All right, I have no one else listed as neutral testimony. Would anyone like to speak as a neutral testifier? Seeing none, I'll close the hearing then on 2325. Committee, we might actually bump up against our real stop time here for the first time this year. But I have faith that we can muddle our way through. Let's look at working a few bills here. 2094, for example. And David, because we've slept since then, can you get us up to speed on what exactly 2094 even is?
Sure, Mr. Chairman, thank you. House Bill 2094 would amend KSA 40-3203. This pertains to documents required of HMOs and health maintenance organizations, HMOs, and Medicaid provider organizations, or MPOs, when applying for a certificate of authority with the insurance department. The bill makes a number of amendments to documents required to establish financial soundness. The bill would amend that they would be required to provide financial projections in conformity with statutory accounting practices for a minimum of 3 years from the date of application. Require the HMO or MPO is expected to incur a deficit. Projection shall be made for each deficit year and for 1 year thereafter, up to a maximum of 5 years. Eliminates the requirement that financial projections include monthly statements of revenue and expense for the first year on a gross dollar as well as per member per month basis. And then that requires statements of revenue and expense for each year, and then a balance sheet for each year for those HMOs and MPOs.
Very good. That does kick it up in my memory here. We were basically cleaning up reporting requirements, as I recall. Committee, do you have any discussion surrounding HB 2094? Representative Neighbor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Since this was basically more of a cleanup bill with language and things, I would move that we pass out House Bill 2094 favorably for passage.
Okay.
And I'm not going to put it on the consent calendar because we just put 4 on there, and this has just some terminology that people may just want to clarify.
I was going to warn against trying to sneak this one through consent. I think there could be an issue there. Well, it's just not that there's anything coy going on there, but when you start changing reporting requirements, that's going to make people a little tense. So I would agree with you on your analysis there and strategy. The motion is seconded, however, by Representative Penn, not Proctor. All right. All those in favor of passing out HB 2094 favorably, say aye. Aye. Opposed, say nay. Very, very good. That one is heading for the floor. All right, HB 2097. David, what was 2097?
2097, this was a bill that would amend KSA 40-247. This pertains to penalties that an agent or broker would face when failing to pay premiums that are held in trust over to the insurers who make the insurance contracts for which those premiums were collected. Under current law, the failure of an agent or broker to pay the premiums owed, less commissions or deductions to an insurer after written demand has been made, is considered prima facie evidence that the agent or broker has used or applied the premium for a purpose other than paying such monies over to the company. Such failure would then subject the agent or broker to penalties listed in that statute. HB 2097 would remove the requirement of a written demand that would establish that prima facie evidence. So you would no longer have to make that written demand of the agent or broker.
Excellent. Now, yes, committee will remember this one as the don't be a deadbeat agent, as I recall. All right, is there discussion surrounding 2097? Amendments? Representative Neighbor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With no amendments, I would move that we pass out House Bill 2097 favorable for passage.
Seconded by Representative Underhill. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, say nay. Very good. That one too is heading to the floor. Let's look at HB 2098, committee. And David, hum a few bars for us if you could.
I'll try my best. HB 2098 amends KSA 40-2 Com 125. This pertains to penalties for entities that violate the insurance law. KSA 40-1 Com 125 provides that after notice and opportunity for a hearing, any person that has engaged or is engaged in any act or practice constituting a violation of any provision of the Kansas insurance statutes are subject to any of the enumerated penalties described in paragraphs 1 and 3 of that statute. The definition of person in subsection D1 lists the business entities that are subject to the statutory penalties for violations of the insurance statutes. 2098 would grant additional generic language to the definition, making it would add any other legal entity subject to the jurisdiction of the commissioner to that definition of person, then make those entities subject to any statutory penalties for violating the insurance law.
Very good, excellent. And took me a little bit. I think it was a while since we worked this one. All right, since we heard this one. February 1st. Okay, well, no wonder I couldn't remember it. That's way too long. All right, no, I remember this one now. Committee, is there any discussion surrounding 2098, particularly amendments that you have in mind? Seeing none. Representative Neighbor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Seeing no amendments or conversation, I move that we pass House Bill 2098, favorable for passage.
You called me speaker. I'm in favor.
Oh, God, I made a mistake.
Oh, no, I love it. All right. All right. You've heard the motion by Representative Neighbor. Do I have a second? Second by Representative Blue. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, say nay. All right, that one too is heading to the floor. Watch for it. It'll be there. It'll probably be read in tomorrow. All right, committee, we put in a full day this time. First time all year. All right, we'll try to keep that from happening ever again. But we will have a meeting on Monday. That one may also last quite a while, so don't schedule anything early in the evening. We will be meeting on Monday, but then and after that, I think we're clear through turnaround. So then we'll see what bills come around after come back to us from the Senate. Until that time, you have something to add? Yes, Representative Penn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I could see Representatives Miller, Howell, and Underhill stand by after this meeting, after we adjourn, I'd appreciate it. We're going to do bills tomorrow, 2100, 2096, and 2093. Thank you.
And you three are in trouble. All right, until Monday, ladies and gentlemen, we are adjourned.